Hello, welcome to Mistwood Publishing Book Club. I am your host, S.R. Mowry, and today we'll be looking at The Veil of Stars, Chapter 12, Knowing Your Enemy. So this chapter is pretty straightforward in that it's mostly about Narbad and company fighting off an assault. But we are actually opened up to the Hale storyline with Zach, where you kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of what their plan is to escape the Ekatot prison. And you do learn Zach's name. My name is Zach Bonebreaker is how that section ends. So you get to meet him. I mean, you've already met him, but now you know that that's his name. If you have the visual companion, you know that he's in there. And I'll put his picture over there somewhere. And just know that he doesn't look like that yet. That's what he looks like later in the series. He gets some special red armor. I don't really want to spoil that, but originally my plan was to introduce Zach in Saga 3. Well, let's go back further than that. So, I wrote Saga 5 first, The Veil of Stars, which you know, probably, it is out and available for purchase, but I often don't recommend it to people just because there are a few spoilers for the Narbad storyline in there, and it was my first attempt at writing. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that after I wrote that, my mom passed away, and in a lot of those feelings, I wrote a book centered around this orc character named Zach Bonebreaker. And it's a very raw book, and chronologically it would be Saga 4. And I ended up deciding I didn't want to publish 5, 4, and then go to 1. I wanted to do the plan of, I did 5, so now let's go back and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then re-release 5. So I do have Saga 4 already written, and I have it edited by a few people. So the things that they were saying when they were editing Saga 4 is that I wish we knew this character already, and I was like, well, he is going to be in the book before this, Saga 3. Anyway, when I was writing this book, I was like, I really enjoy writing Zach Bonebreaker, so what if I included it, what if I brought him all the way back to book 1? And that's where we meet him. And that decision has been really formative, I would say. And, I mean, one of the most formative decisions that I've made based off of what editors have told me. And, you know, if I would have done Saga 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then came back, I don't know, I think doing it that way creates continuity issues. So that's one reason why I ended up deciding to go back to write Saga 1 before I continued into 6, 7, and so on. So at any rate, Zach Bonebreaker, to most people, that name drop doesn't really mean much. Where he's like, you know, who are you, what's your name? And he's like, my name's Zach Bonebreaker. But to my editors, when they saw that name, they were like, oh my gosh, you know, it's Zach. Because they did not expect at all to see him in this book. So that was neat when I got that back from some editors, that their reaction to seeing Zach show up here. It's not a reaction I'll get from really, you know, anybody else, but it was nice to get that reaction from at least a few people. But at any rate, all that to say, you know, the whole reason that Hale's storyline is as good as it is is because of some advice that some editors gave me when they were editing this book after they had already edited Saga 4, and it's pretty nice. It's just kind of funny how things work like that. So the next section, and really takes us to the end of the chapter, is Ruth and Narbad and company fighting off all these lifts. So lifts, you get a pretty good description of them here in this section of the book. I think I do a pretty good job of describing what they look like, as well as a few other points in the book, or maybe the next book. Lifts they're very specific, in their appearance, so it can take a bit to describe them, and it's tricky. Anytime I bring up lifts again, it's like I feel like I have to describe them again, but you don't want to do it too much. There's a lot to describe. You don't want to do it too much because people then feel like they're getting bogged down in the story. So it's an interesting balance, but you get to see a lot of cool combat. I really wanted to let this chapter be kind of where we see a lot of the characters' prowess as a warrior. So we get some pretty cool moments from almost every character. It's probably, in particular, Linod. I think in this chapter people kind of gain a bit of more respect for him and kind of see for the first time what I mean when I say that characters with magical abilities are really quite something to behold in my books. As Ruth says, I remember now why clerics are so useful. So we see acts of heroism by Ruth, Narbad, the dwarves, and really this chapter is the culmination of is finally in his, indirectly confronting the companions and trying to kill them before they, or at least eliminate them before they can foil the plans of him and Karam. And we see that Narbad is mortally wounded in this chapter, and that Talia ends up saving his life using some magic that confuses and baffles even Linod. And so Linod's curiosity is piqued in that, as he says, there's really nothing that his magic can do for Narbad. This is it's beyond his abilities, but Talia somehow manages to heal him. And Linod is, he's the cleric, and he's confused on what exactly is going on. And so is Talia. She's like, what happened to me? Like, what just happened? Can somebody, how was I able to do what I did? Narbad was dying and then he wasn't. She's like completely oblivious. And if you look at the cover, you kind of can see that her hand is glowing yellow. And that's really kind of setting up something really big that you will get answers to in this book, but you won't get the full answers of what exactly Talia's powers are until Saga 2, which does take a pretty big, substantial role in Saga 2 as her mysterious abilities. And that's all I'll say about that. But she is able to heal Narbad from a mortal wound, which is a pretty significant thing, and the companions end up defeating the monster, but end up having to retreat further into what you would, the cave, the Underdark, if you will. And this leads them to the gates of the Twin Mountains, where the king comes out, and it's kind of an interesting interaction between the companions and Boflin and Ragni's king. And something that's, the advice that you often hear from fantasy writers is, or really writers in general, is that you want to write what the kind of book that you would want to read. And so one of the things that You know, when I read The Lord of the Rings, when I read The Hobbit, I would get sometimes frustrated in that I really like dwarves, but we never really get to see what Tolkien considers to be a thriving dwarven society. So in the next chapter, you know, it's titled The Dwarf King, and they're entering this dwarven kingdom, and so it's kind of based on the premise that you're going to be able to get to see at least what I would consider a thriving dwarven kingdom, and I let my imagination go in a logical but yet creative, you know, pathway into what a dwarven society in its prime would look like. But that'll be next week, chapter 13, and we're heading into really the beef of part 2, and hope to see you next week.